Bastard. The word escaped Olivia Reed's lips before she could stop herself, her coffee cup freezing midway to her mouth as she stared at the headline splashed across her phone screen. Maxwell Industries cuts 300 jobs, CEO celebrates with yacht. Purchase. The image showed a smirking Damian Maxwell raising a champagne glass on the deck of what appeared to be a floating palace, his steel-gray eyes as cold as the metal his empire was built upon. The tiny cafe where Olivia worked was nearly empty this early in the morning, save for a man in the corner who glanced up at her outburst before returning to his newspaper. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I see Maxwell's made another fan," chuckled Bernard, the elderly cafe owner, as he wiped down the counter. "You know, when I was young, business tycoons at least pretended to care about their workers." Olivia tucked a strand of unruly auburn hair behind her ear. "Sorry, Bernie, it's just, my sister worked for one of his subsidiaries. 3 years of overtime, and she got a generic termination email last night." Bernard patted her hand. "No need to apologize, sunshine. That man's heart is a vault that's never been opened." The bells above the cafe door jingled, and Olivia automatically slipped into her customer service smile, the one that paid her rent but never reached her eyes. "Welcome to Bernie's. What can I—" The words died in her throat. The man who entered moved with the ease of someone who knew their place in the world, at the very top. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than her annual salary, his watch more than her student debt. But it was his face that stopped her cold, impossibly handsome in that ruthless, carved-from-marble way that seemed exclusive to the obscenely wealthy. "Black coffee, no sugar," he said without looking up from his phone, his voice a smooth baritone that expected obedience. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a cup, not from intimidation, but from a strange, electric recognition. She knew that face. "Anything else, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. His head snapped up, those silver eyes widening fractionally, the barest crack in his composure. "You know who I am?" She slid the coffee across the counter. The bastard with the yacht? Hard to miss. Instead of the outrage she expected, something else flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps, or curiosity. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her well-worn apron, the dark circles under her green eyes, the defiance in her stance. "What's your name?" he asked, taking the coffee. "Olivia Reed," she answered, lifting her chin slightly. "Olivia Reed," he repeated, as though testing how the syllables felt on his tongue. "You're fired." Her heart plummeted. "Excuse me?" "From this job," he clarified, taking a sip of his coffee. "I have a proposition for you, one that pays significantly, better than—" He gestured vaguely around the cafe. "This." Bernard stepped forward protectively. "Now listen here." Damian Maxwell raised a hand, silencing him. "Your employee will be well compensated for her time, sir. And if she declines my offer, her position here will remain open with 3 months' salary paid in advance." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "What kind of proposition?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "The kind that requires someone exactly like you, Ms. Reed. Someone with fire in their eyes when they look at me." He slid a business card across the counter. "My office, 3 o'clock today. You'll want to hear what I have to say." Before she could respond, he turned and walked out, leaving behind the untouched coffee and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Bernard whistled low. "Girl, what did you do to catch the eye of Damian Maxwell?" Olivia stared at the elegant business card, her mind racing. "I called him a bastard to his face." "And he offered you a job?" Bernard laughed incredulously. "This I gotta hear about." "Go on then, take the afternoon off." Later, as Olivia stood outside the towering glass headquarters of Maxwell Industries, doubt gnawed at her. This was madness. The man was notorious for his cutthroat tactics and cold dismissal of anyone who crossed him. Yet something about his offer, and the intensity in those steel eyes, had her stepping through the revolving doors. What she didn't know was that across town, in an equally imposing office, Damian Maxwell's greatest rival was reviewing the dossier of a certain Turkish business magnate whose company he desperately needed to acquire. And Damian Maxwell never lost. Not in business, not in life, not until Olivia Reed. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Olivia paced the length of Damian Maxwell's obscenely large office, her modest department store dress a stark contrast to the sleek, minimalist luxury surrounding her. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city that seemed to bow at Maxwell's feet. "You want me to do what?" Damian leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching her with that infuriating half-smile. "I want you to make Kerem Arslan fall in love with you." "The Turkish shipping magnate?" Olivia stopped pacing. "The one whose company you're trying to acquire?" "The very same." Damian straightened, moving to a holographic display that projected Kerem Arslan's image, a man with intense dark eyes, olive skin, and a reputation as formidable as Maxwell's own. "Arslan International has technology my company needs. Their board is willing to sell, but Kerem is resistant." Olivia laughed, the sound sharp in the carefully acoustically designed room. "So your brilliant plan is corporate seduction? That's not just unethical. It's deranged." "Is it?" Damian approached, her close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and exclusive. "Arslan has rejected every legitimate business offer. He responds only to emotion, not logic. And I've noticed he has a particular affinity for women who remind him of someone he lost years ago." "Someone he lost?" "His fiancée. She died in a boating accident. The research indicates you bear a striking resemblance." Olivia felt ice sliding down her spine. "That's monstrous." "No," Damian countered, his voice dropping lower. "It's business, and I'm prepared to pay you $2 million to get close to him for 3 months. The number hit her like a physical blow. $2 million. Her student loans, her sister's medical bills, her parents' mortgage, all gone with money to spare. "You want me to make him fall for me just so you can steal his company?" "I prefer strategic acquisition," Damian corrected. "And I don't need him to fall in love with you. I need him distracted, softened, open to negotiation." He picked up a thick folder from his desk. "This contains everything you need to know about Kerem Arslan, his likes, dislikes, habits, favorite restaurants. You'll be positioned as an art consultant hired to curate pieces for his new Manhattan residence." "I don't know anything about art," Olivia protested. "You have a degree in art history that you've never used because of student debt," Damian replied smoothly. "Page 3 of your background check." Olivia bristled. "You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone who calls me a bastard to my face and lives to tell about it." Despite herself, a laugh bubbled up from her chest. "Most people would just sue." "I'm not most people." The intensity in his gaze made her look away. This was madness. Complete madness. Yet the promise of financial freedom sang a siren song she couldn't ignore. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You could hire professionals for this kind of corporate espionage." Damian's expression shifted, becoming more calculating. "Because Kerem Arslan is exceptionally good at spotting frauds. He surrounds himself with people trained to detect deception. But you?" His eyes swept over her. "You wear every emotion on your face. Your outrage at that headline this morning was genuine. Your disdain for me is genuine. That authenticity is something that can't be trained or bought." "So my hatred for men like you is my selling point?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Precisely." He handed her a business card with an address. "An apartment has been prepared for you. A car will pick you up tomorrow morning. Your first accidental meeting with Kerem is at the Guggenheim Gala tomorrow night." "I haven't said yes." "You will," he said with infuriating confidence. "Not for me. For the $2 million that will change your life." Olivia stared at the card, then back at Damian Maxwell, the devil in an Armani suit offering her a deal too tempting to refuse. "One condition," she said finally. My sister gets her job back, with a promotion. Something like respect flickered in Damien's eyes. Done. 48 hours later, Olivia found herself in a gown that cost more than her yearly rent, standing in the Guggenheim surrounded by New York's elite. Her hair had been styled by someone who usually worked with celebrities, her makeup applied by fingers that had touched the faces of royalty. Remember, Damien's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. You're looking at the Kandinsky when he approaches. Comment on the use of color. He'll appreciate that. Olivia subtly touched her ear. Stop micromanaging. I read the file. She could almost hear his scowl through the earpiece. From across the room, she spotted him watching her, his attention momentarily diverted by a glamorous blonde in red. You're 3 o'clock, Damien instructed, coming your way. Olivia turned slightly, pretending to admire the painting before her. From her peripheral vision she caught sight of him, Kerem Arslan moving through the crowd with the confident grace of a man accustomed to command. He was handsome in a way entirely different from Damien, warmer somehow, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he actually used those muscles occasionally. As he drew nearer, Olivia felt a flutter of guilt. This man was about to become collateral damage in Damien Maxwell's war of acquisition. But then she thought of her sister, of the lives Maxwell had carelessly upended and steeled herself. The tension between the geometric and the organic is fascinating, isn't it? Came a deep voice with the barest hint of an accent. Olivia turned, meeting the dark, intelligent eyes of Kerem Arslan. I was just thinking the same thing, she replied, offering her hand. Olivia Reed. As their fingers touched, she heard Damien's voice in her ear, tense and somehow changed. Perfect. He's hooked. What Olivia couldn't see was the strange expression that crossed Damien Maxwell's face as he watched them, something that, on anyone else, might have been mistaken for jealousy. The game had begun, but no one, not even Damien Maxwell, knew exactly how it would end. Scoundrel, you absolute scoundrel. Olivia's laughter echoed across the rooftop garden of Kerem, Arslan's Manhattan penthouse, as he finished recounting a particularly mischievous childhood escapade involving his grandfather's prized racing pigeons and an impromptu liberation ceremony. 3 weeks had passed since their chance meeting at the Guggenheim. 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated accidental encounters, art consultations, and coffee meetings that had progressed with surprising ease into dinners, and now this private evening beneath the stars. My grandfather didn't speak to me for a month, Kerem admitted, his eyes crinkling with mirth. But the birds all came back eventually. They just needed to stretch their wings. Like you did, Olivia observed, taking a sip of the ridiculously expensive wine he'd opened. Coming to America, building your own empire separate from your family's. Kerem's expression softened, becoming more contemplative. We all need to find our own path, don't we? Even when others have mapped the journey for us. There was something in his voice, a genuine warmth and wisdom that made Olivia's stomach twist with guilt. Kerem Arslan was not the cold-hearted business tyrant Damien had described. He was thoughtful, generous, and possessed a philosophical depth that took her by surprise. Your turn, Kerem prompted, refilling her glass. Tell me something about Olivia Reed that isn't in her impressive resume. A resume carefully fabricated by Damien Maxwell's team. Her conscience reminded her. I once organized a sit-in protest against the dean of my university when they tried to cut funding for the arts programs, she offered, relieved to share something true about herself. We recreated famous revolutionary paintings using students as models. The photos went viral. Kerem's eyes lit up. Ah, a fighter with an artistic soul. This explains why you understand the emotional power of art, not just its technical or investment value. He leaned closer. This is what first struck me about you, Olivia. You don't just see paintings, you feel them. Her cheeks warmed at his proximity and the sincerity in his voice. This was not supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to enjoy his company so genuinely. The sharp buzz of her phone interrupted the moment. Damien's name flashed on the screen. Work emergency, she apologized, standing. I need to take this. Once safely inside the penthouse's guest bathroom, she answered. What? You've missed 2 check-ins. Damien's clipped voice came through. I was beginning to think Arslan had discovered your true purpose and thrown you off his balcony. Would that inconvenience your precious schedule? She shot back. It would necessitate finding a new operative, which would be tedious. A pause. How is it progressing? Olivia sighed, leaning against the marble countertop. He's not what you described. He's actually decent. Don't get soft on me, Olivia. Remember why you're there. Because you're paying me to manipulate a man whose only crime is refusing to sell you his company? Because his company is developing shipping technology that could revolutionize global trade, and he's sitting on it out of sentimentality, Damien countered. That technology could change millions of lives, or make you millions of dollars. Both can be true. His voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. We need to accelerate the timeline. Invite him to the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Next week, I'll be there. I want to see your progress in person. Before she could argue, he hung up. Olivia stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the polished woman who stared back. Designer clothes, professional makeup, hair styled to perfection, all Damien's creation, a beautiful trap for Karam Arslan. When she returned to the rooftop, Karam was standing at the edge, gazing out at the city lights. Beautiful, isn't it? He said without turning. A city of dreams and dreamers. Olivia moved beside him. And schemers, she added, before she could stop herself. He laughed softly. Yes, those two. He turned to face her. You know, when I first came to New York, Damien Maxwell was the man everyone said I should emulate. The ultimate American success story. Olivia tensed at the mention of Damien's name. And now? Now I see a man who builds empires but has no kingdom. All that power, yet something essential is missing. Karam's eyes searched hers. Do you know him? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. For a terrifying moment, Olivia wondered if he knew everything, if this had all been a counter game. Only by reputation, she managed. Ah, Karam nodded. Well, I will be seeing him next week. He's finally agreed to a meeting after months of having his people talk to my people. Olivia's heart raced. This wasn't in the plan. Really? Where? Some charity event at the Metropolitan Museum, art and philanthropy, a perfect cover for business, no? His smile was knowing but not suspicious. Perhaps you would accompany me? Your expertise would be valuable and… He took her hand gently. I would enjoy your company. Inside her mind, alarm bells rang. This wasn't how it was supposed to unfold. Damien and Karam weren't supposed to interact directly, not with her in the middle. I'd love to, she heard herself say. Later that night, in her Maxwell-funded luxury apartment, Olivia called Damien despite the late hour. He knows, she blurted, when he answered. What? Damien sounded fully awake despite the time. Karam, he mentioned you, said you're meeting at the gala, the same one you want me to bring him to. This wasn't the plan. There was a long pause on the line. It's a development, Damien finally said, not a problem. He's going to see us together. No, he's going to see me acknowledging my art consultant's date with a respectful distance. It adds credibility to your cover. Olivia paced her living room. This is getting complicated, Damien. Business always is. His voice shifted, becoming oddly gentle. You're doing well, Olivia. Better than I anticipated. The unexpected praise warmed her more than it should have. He's not what you said. He's kind, thoughtful. He's a businessman protecting his interests? Damien cut her off, his tone hardening again. Don't mistake charm for character. Like I shouldn't mistake your ruthlessness for strength? She challenged. Another pause, longer this time. Get some sleep, Olivia. The game is entering its critical phase. After he hung up, Olivia stood at her window, staring out at the same city lights Karam had admired. Two powerful men, two empires, and somehow she had become the territory they were battling over. What Olivia didn't know was that across town, Damian Maxwell sat in his darkened office looking at a surveillance photo of her laughing with Karam on the rooftop. His expression was unreadable as he closed the file and whispered something that sounded almost like regret into the empty room. The game was indeed entering its critical phase, but the true stakes had nothing to do with shipping technology or corporate acquisitions. And neither man was playing the game they thought they were. Fraud. The word was barely a whisper, but it reverberated through Olivia's mind as she examined her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her was a breathtaking stranger in a midnight blue gown that flowed like liquid starlight across her skin. Diamond earrings, on loan from Maxwell Industries' collection, caught the light with every movement of her head. A beautiful lie, crafted by Damian Maxwell's money and imagination. The Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala was the social event of the season, a gathering of New York's wealthiest and most influential under the pretense of philanthropy. Tonight, it would become the stage for a performance she wasn't sure she could deliver. Her phone chimed with a text from Karam. "On my way. Can't wait to see you." Followed almost immediately by one from Damian. "Car downstairs. Arrive before Arslan." Olivia closed her eyes, gathering her composure. The plan was simple. She would arrive first, establish her presence as Damian's art consultant, then coincidentally run into Karam. Damian would maintain a professional distance, careful not to undermine her supposed autonomy. A simple choreography of deception. The museum was transformed when she arrived, the grand hall a shimmering spectacle of crystals, flowers, and subtle lighting that made everyone look like their most beautiful selves. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes while a string quartet played softly in the background. "You clean up nicely," came Damian's voice from behind her. Olivia turned to find him in a tuxedo that looked like it had been created specifically for his frame, his silver eyes enhanced by the monochromatic elegance of black and white. "A compliment from the great Damian Maxwell," she replied, accepting the champagne he offered. "Should I check the sky for flying pigs?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "I'm simply acknowledging an objective fact. The dress was a good choice." "You mean your stylist's choice?" "My stylist presented options. I selected this one." His gaze lingered on her for a beat too long. "It matches your eyes when you're angry." Before she could respond, he was guiding her through the crowd with a light touch on the small of her back, introducing her to various art world figures who could reinforce her cover story. Each interaction was seamless, with Damian playing the role of respectful employer to perfection. "Maxwell, you old shark," boomed a voice behind them. "I didn't know you had an interest in Renaissance art beyond its investment potential." They turned to find Karam Arslan, resplendent in a midnight blue tuxedo that Olivia noted with an internal groan, perfectly matched her dress, a coincidence that wouldn't go unnoticed. "Arslan," Damian acknowledged with a curt nod. "I believe you've met Ms. Reed, my art consultant." Karam's eyes widened fractionally as they moved from Damian to Olivia. "Ms. Reed, you work for Maxwell Industries?" Olivia felt the floor tilt beneath her. This moment, the revelation, the confusion, none of it had been adequately planned for. "Freelance consulting," she managed, "for specific acquisitions." "Olivia has an exceptional eye," Damian added smoothly. "She's advising on the corporate collection, particularly pieces that might appreciate in certain emerging markets." The emphasis on the last two words was subtle, but unmistakable. A business threat clothed in social pleasantry. Karam's expression revealed nothing but polite interest. "Indeed. How fortunate for me that our paths crossed at the Guggenheim then. Olivia has been invaluable in helping curate pieces for my new residence." The tension between the two men crackled like electricity. Olivia stood between them, the fulcrum of a dangerous seesaw. "What a small world," Damian remarked, his tone frigid. "Microscopic," Karam agreed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. The moment stretched, taut and precarious, until Olivia forced a light laugh. Well, now that we've established I'm in high demand, perhaps I should network with potential clients who aren't engaged in a corporate Cold War. Her boldness startled both men out of their staring contest. "Dance with me," Karam said suddenly, extending his hand, "before you disappear into the crowd." Olivia glanced at Damien, whose jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. "By all means," he said with cool detachment. "Business can wait for another time." As Karam led her to the dance floor, his hand warm against hers, Olivia felt Damien's eyes following them. The weight of his gaze was like a physical touch across her skin. "So," Karam said once they were swaying to the music, his voice low and measured, "you neglected to mention your connection to my most persistent suitor." "It didn't seem relevant to our discussions about art," she replied, clinging to the thin thread of her cover story. Karam's laugh was soft but without humor. "Olivia, please, do you take me for a fool?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't understand the timing of our meeting, your expertise in exactly the areas of art I'm interested in, the way you seem to anticipate my preferences." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Maxwell sent you, didn't he? To soften me up for his acquisition." The directness of the accusation left her speechless. Denial would be futile. Karam's eyes held the certainty of a man who had already connected all the dots. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the music. To her surprise, Karam smiled. "I suspected as much from our second meeting. Maxwell is nothing if not predictable in his ruthlessness." "You knew?" Olivia faltered in their dance step. "All this time? I knew someone like you doesn't simply appear in my life by coincidence. The question is..." He twirled her gently, bringing her back into his arms. "What happens now that the masks are off?" Across the room, Damien watched them with an expression that had nothing to do with business concerns. He hadn't anticipated the sight of Olivia in another man's arms would affect him so viscerally. The uncomfortable truth was becoming harder to ignore. What had begun as a strategic deployment of an asset had evolved into something far more complicated. "They make a striking couple," observed a woman beside him following his gaze. "Your art consultant and the Turkish shipping magnate." Damien's response was clipped. "She's doing her job. Is that what they're calling it these days?" The woman smirked. "I've never seen a business transaction that looked quite so intimate." On the dance floor, Olivia was trying to process Karam's revelation. "If you knew I was working for Damien, why continue our arrangement?" Karam's eyes softened. "Because despite the circumstances of our meeting, I believe what has grown between us is genuine." He leaned closer. "The question is whether you feel the same, or if your heart belongs to someone else entirely." "Someone else?" Olivia echoed, confusion evident in her voice. Karam glanced meaningfully toward Damien. "I've seen how you look at him when you think no one is watching. The same way he looks at you when he thinks the same." That's absurd," she stammered. "He sees me as nothing more than a tool for his business ambitions." "Are you certain?" Karam challenged gently. "Because a man doesn't look at a business tool the way Maxwell looks at you." The music ended, and Karam released her with a formal bow. "I believe it's time we all stopped playing games, don't you? Let's finish this conversation with Maxwell present. After all, we're all adults here." Before she could protest, he was guiding her back toward Damien, who straightened as they approached. "Maxwell," Karam announced without preamble, "your scheme has been exposed. Ms. Reed has confirmed her role as your corporate Matahari." Damien's face remained impassive, but Olivia noticed the slight narrowing of his eyes, the only tell in his perfect poker face. "And yet," Karam continued, "I find myself in the unusual position of thanking you for your underhanded tactics. They brought Olivia into my life, and for that I'm grateful." He turned to Olivia, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll leave you two to discuss the changing parameters of your arrangement. When you're ready to talk, Truly, talk about the future, you know where to find me. With that, he departed, leaving Olivia and Damien in a bubble of tense silence amidst the swirling gala. He knew, Olivia finally said, the entire time. Damien's expression was unreadable. It seems we underestimated him. I'd say we underestimated a lot of things, Olivia replied, meeting his gaze directly. Something shifted in the air between them, a current of unspoken truths too powerful to ignore. The pretense of employer and employee, schemer and accomplice seemed suddenly inadequate to describe what had evolved. Damien, she began, using his first name without the usual edge of challenge. What are we really doing here? His answer, when it came, would change everything. But before he could speak, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Security personnel were moving quickly, and the crowd parted to reveal the last person either of them expected to see. The game had just changed again. Traitor! The accusation cut through the elegant murmur of the gala like a thunderclap. All heads turned toward the entrance where Vanessa Maxwell, Damien's sister and CFO of Maxwell Industries, stood glaring at her brother with undisguised fury. Doing business behind the board's back, Damien? She strode toward them, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. Or should I say, behind my back? Olivia stepped closer to Damien instinctively, a movement not lost on Vanessa, whose sharp eyes narrowed as she assessed the woman at her brother's side. So this is your secret weapon? Vanessa's voice dripped with disdain. The art consultant who's been running up company expenses with Karam Arslan? Damien's posture stiffened, the only indication of his discomfort. Vanessa, this isn't the place. No, the place was the boardroom where you should have disclosed that you're using company funds to orchestrate an elaborate seduction scheme. She brandished her phone with its screen displaying surveillance, photos of Olivia and Karam. The board received an anonymous tip about your little operation. Care to guess who sent it? Olivia felt the weight of curious stares from the surrounding guests. What had been a private drama was rapidly becoming a public spectacle. Not here, Damien said firmly, taking his sister's elbow and guiding her toward a secluded alcove. He glanced at Olivia. Give us a moment. Left alone in the crowd, Olivia felt exposed, vulnerable. The elegant facade she'd maintained all evening was crumbling. Across the room, she caught sight of Karam watching the scene unfold with an expression that betrayed nothing. Her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Roof garden. 5 minutes. Come alone. Slipping away from the curious onlookers, Olivia made her way through the museum's labyrinthine corridors until she found the service elevator that led to the rooftop sculpture garden. The spring night air was cool against her flushed skin as she stepped out among the modernist installations, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop. I apologize for the dramatic summons, came Karam's voice from behind a large metal sculpture, but I thought you might appreciate an escape from the drama below. He stepped into view, his expression softer than she'd expected. You seem surprised to see me. I assumed you'd be halfway to Turkey by now, Olivia admitted. After everything, after discovering I was the target of corporate espionage? He smiled without bitterness. Or after realizing the woman I've grown to, care for, was part of the scheme? Olivia winced. Both. Karam moved closer, his eyes searching hers. Did you know I was the one who sent the evidence to Maxwell's board? Her surprise must have been evident, because he laughed softly. Business, like chess, requires thinking several moves ahead. Maxwell deployed you as his queen but failed to protect his flanks. This was all part of your counter-strategy? Olivia asked, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. Including us? No. Karam's voice was firm. What happened between us was unexpected. For both of us, I think. The business maneuvering was inevitable, but my feelings for you are separate from that game. He took her hands in his. I've lost too much in my life to play games with matters of the heart, which is why I need to ask you something important before we go any further. Olivia held her breath, knowing what was coming. Are you in love with Damien Maxwell? The question hung in the air between them, demanding truth after months of deception. Before she could answer, the roof access door burst open, revealing Damien, his perfect composure finally fractured. He stopped short at the sight of them, hands clasped together beneath the moonlight. "Well," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "it seems you two have moved from business to pleasure rather efficiently." "Damien," Olivia began, dropping Karam's hands. "My sister has informed the board of your involvement," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Your services are no longer required by Maxwell Industries. The remaining payment will be transferred to your account as agreed." The cold dismissal stung worse than Olivia had anticipated. "Is that all you have to say?" "What else is there?" His silver eyes were glacial. "The operation is compromised. We cut our losses and move on. That's business." "No," Olivia countered, finding strength in her anger. "That's cowardice." Damien's eyebrows raised fractionally, the closest he came to showing surprise. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." She stepped toward him, years of serving demanding customers and months of playing a role falling away as she faced him with her true self. "You're hiding behind business because you're afraid to admit what this really was about. And what exactly do you think this was about?" His voice was dangerous, quiet. "It was never about Arslan International's technology, was it?" She gestured to Karam, who watched their exchange with keen interest. "It was about beating him, winning, proving you're the alpha shark in the corporate ocean." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Damien said dismissively. "Don't I? You could have approached Karam directly, offered a fair partnership. Instead, you created this elaborate scheme that put me in the middle." Her voice softened. "What I can't figure out is when it stopped being about the acquisition for you. When did I become more than just a pawn in your game?" Something flickered in Damien's eyes, vulnerability, quickly masked. "You're overestimating your importance." "And you're underestimating her intelligence," Karam interjected, moving to stand beside Olivia. "She deserves better than either of us has offered her." The two men regarded each other, rivals in business and now in something far more personal. "You know why I've refused to sell to you, Maxwell?" Karam asked. "It's not the technology, it's because you treat everything and everyone as commodities to be acquired, used, and discarded. Your company culture is a reflection of your personal emptiness." Damien's jaw tightened. "Spare me the philosophical lecture on corporate ethics from a man who's been stalking my art consultant." "Not stalking," Karam corrected. "Courting. There's a difference. One I'd be happy to explain, but I think Olivia deserves to speak now." They both turned to her, these powerful men who had redrawn the boundaries of her world in just a few short months. "I can't believe I'm standing on a rooftop with two billionaires fighting over me," she said with a disbelieving laugh. "This is absurd. 3 months ago I was serving coffee and worrying about rent." "And now?" Karam prompted gently. Olivia took a deep breath. "And now I'm walking away from both of you." Their identical expressions of shock would have been comical, under different circumstances. "I don't belong to either of you," she continued. "I'm not a corporate asset or a prize to be won. I deserve to be more than collateral damage in your business rivalry." She turned to Karam. "You're a good man with a kind heart, but we began with a lie. Maybe someday we could start fresh, but not now. Not like this." Then she faced Damien, whose mask of indifference had slipped to reveal something raw and uncertain. "And you're brilliant and maddening and absolutely terrified of anything you can't control, including your feelings for me." "I don't," he began. "Yes, you do," she interrupted. "The night we met, you didn't hire me because I called you a bastard. You hired me because I made you feel something. And that terrified you so much you had to turn it into a business transaction to make it safe." For once, Damien Maxwell was speechless. Olivia stepped back, creating distance between herself and both men. "I'm going to use the money to start my own art consultancy, one that actually helps artists, not just collectors. And when I'm ready, if I'm ready, to explore whatever this is," she gestured between the three of them, "it will be on my terms." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, stopping only when Damien called her name. "Olivia." His voice had lost its usual command, sounding almost uncertain. "What if I said I want to invest in your new company?" She looked back at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'd say you need to learn the difference between investing and controlling." "I'm a quick study," he replied, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "Prove it," she challenged, and then she was gone. 6 months later. "Reed Fine Arts Consulting. How may I direct your call?" Olivia's sister, Emily, answered the phone at the front desk of their newly renovated Soho office. Olivia smiled as she watched from her glass-walled office. The company was small but growing, with a focus on connecting emerging artists with ethical collectors and corporate clients who valued art beyond its investment potential. Her phone chimed with a text message. "Damien. Board meeting concluded. Approve the partnership with Arslan International. Joint venture proceeds as discussed. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" Before she could respond, another message appeared. "Karem. Signed the papers today. Your suggestion for the joint humanitarian initiative using our shipping technology was brilliant. Perhaps we could discuss phase 2 over lunch next week." Olivia leaned back in her chair, marveling at how much had changed. After walking away from both men that night, she had expected to never hear from either again. Instead, something unexpected had happened. Damien had indeed proven himself a quick study. Instead of trying to control her new venture, he had become a silent partner, offering connections and resources without strings. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a genuine partnership of equals, both professional and increasingly personal. Karem, meanwhile, had returned to Turkey to reconsider his company's future. When he returned to New York 3 months later, it was with a proposal. Not for Olivia, but for Damien, a joint venture that would utilize Arslan International's revolutionary shipping technology for both profit and humanitarian efforts. What had begun as a scheme had transformed into something none of them could have predicted, a 3-way partnership that was reshaping global shipping while funding arts programs in underserved communities worldwide. And Olivia, the once struggling barista who had called a billionaire a bastard to his face, was now running her own successful company, dating, cautiously, the same billionaire, and maintaining a warm friendship with his former rival. She typed a response. To Damien, "Dinner sounds perfect. Wear something casual for once. Also, Emily needs your signature on the education grant paperwork." To Karem she wrote, "Congrats on the partnership. Lunch next week works. There's a new Turkish fusion place in Tribeca I think you'll love." As she set down her phone, Olivia caught sight of the framed photo on her desk. The 3 of them at the launch of their joint charitable foundation, all smiles and tentative new beginnings. "Ms. Reed?" Emily appeared at her door. "You're 3. O'Clock is here, the gallery owner from Berlin." "Send him in," Olivia replied, standing to greet her client. As she moved around her desk, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Confident, purposeful, entirely herself. No longer playing a role in someone else's story, but the author of her own. She smiled at the memory of that first morning in Bernie's cafe, when she had looked at Damien Maxwell's photo and uttered that single life-changing word. Bastard. She whispered to herself with affection, and opened the door to welcome her future. The espresso machine hissed like an angry cat as Amelia Foster frantically tried to unclog it, acutely aware of the growing line of impatient customers. It was 7:42 a.m. at Brood Awakening, and Manhattan's financial elite were not known for their patience when caffeine-deprived. "Come on, you temperamental beast," she muttered, banging the side of the machine with practiced precision. At 28, Amelia had mastered the art of coaxing life from dying appliances, a skill born of necessity rather than choice. Behind her, Casey, her ever-loyal co-worker, shot her a sympathetic glance while handling the register. "The natives are getting restless," she whispered. Just as Amelia finally got the machine working, the bell above the door chimed. Through the steam, she caught sight of him, Daniel Blackwood, 34-year-old tech billionaire and notorious corporate raider, whose face graced the cover of last month's Forbes. His steel blue eyes scanned the cafe with the calculated precision of someone accustomed to assessing assets rather than people. Isn't that? Casey began. Shh, just act normal, Amelia hissed, suddenly very interested in perfecting a latte, art design. The crowd parted for Daniel like the Red Sea for Moses, an unconscious deference to power and wealth that sickened Amelia even as she found herself straightening her posture. Black coffee, no room. His voice was clipped, his attention fixed on his phone. $4, Amelia replied, matching his coldness. For the first time, he looked up. Their eyes met, and something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, at being addressed without the usual fawning deference. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, the question genuine rather than arrogant. Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Someone who hasn't paid for their coffee yet?" A startled laugh escaped him, drawing stares from everyone in the cafe. Daniel Blackwood wasn't known for laughing. "Touché," he said, handing over a 20. "Keep the change." "We have a tip jar," she replied, pointing to the mason jar labeled College Fund in her handwriting. "If you're feeling generous." He studied her for a moment before dropping the entire 20 into the jar. "What's your name?" "Why? Planning to buy the shop and fire me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Another laugh, smaller, but more genuine. "Actually, I was planning to ask you to dinner." The espresso machine chose that moment to explode, sending a geyser of scalding water and coffee grounds into the air. Amelia's quick reflexes saved her from the worst of it, but her apron was drenched and speckles of dark roast dotted her face like freckles. The cafe fell silent. Amelia looked up at Daniel, coffee dripping from her nose, and did the only thing that made sense. She burst out laughing, the kind of uncontrollable, slightly hysterical laughter that bubbles up in the face of cosmic absurdity. To everyone's shock, especially Casey's, whose jaw practically hit the floor, Daniel started laughing too. "Is that a yes to dinner?" he asked when they'd both caught their breath. Amelia wiped her face with a clean towel. "No, that's a I'll think about it after you bring in a repairman for this machine." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Done." "I was joking." "I wasn't." He pulled out a business card, crisp white with embossed black lettering, and placed it next to the register. "Call that number when your shift ends. I'll have someone here within the hour." Before she could protest, he turned and walked out, leaving his untouched $4 coffee behind and the cafe buzzing with whispers. Casey sidled up to her, eyes wide. "Did Daniel Blackwood, aka New York's most eligible bachelor, aka the Shark of Silicon Alley, just ask you out?" "Apparently," Amelia said, staring at the door. "And did you just negotiate repairs before agreeing?" "Apparently." Casey shook her head in disbelief. "Girl, your apartment has had a broken heater for 3 months and you're making a billionaire fix the coffee machine at your minimum wage job?" Amelia turned the business card over in her fingers, a smile playing at her lips. "Well, if he's serious, maybe I'll mention the heater too." Little did she know that the broken espresso machine was about to be the least of her problems, and that Daniel Blackwood had never been more serious about anything in his life. Daniel Blackwood was not accustomed to waiting. Board members rescheduled meetings for him. Restaurants cleared tables at his arrival. Even his private jet had never sat idle on a runway for more than 5 minutes. Yet here he was, checking his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes, sitting on a park bench in Washington Square Park, waiting for a barista who was already 15 minutes late. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, about to stand when he spotted her hurrying through the arch, her chestnut hair escaping from a messy bun, cheeks flushed from running. "You're late," he said as she approached, unable to help himself. Amelia plopped down beside him, not the least bit apologetic. "My replacement was late, then the subway stalled, and frankly, I almost didn't come at all. Yet here you are." Daniel found himself smiling despite his irritation. "Why?" She leaned back, studying him with those disarming hazel eyes. "Curiosity. The repairman you sent fixed not just our espresso machine but every appliance in the shop. The owner nearly had a heart attack when he found out. I believe in thorough work. Or showing off." She paused. Plus, Casey threatened to steal my cat if I didn't come and report back every detail. Daniel laughed, his second genuine laugh in as many days. Before meeting Amelia, his executive assistant had once remarked that his laugh was as rare as a solar eclipse. "Hungry?" he asked, standing. "Starving, but—" She hesitated, eyeing his tailored suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. "I'm not exactly dressed for wherever billionaires eat." Daniel glanced at her worn jeans, oversized sweater, and scuffed boots. "You look perfect," he said, surprising himself with his sincerity. "And who said anything about a billionaire restaurant?" 30 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a hole-in-the-wall Ukrainian place in the East Village, their table covered with pierogi, stuffed cabbage, and borscht that stained their lips crimson. "So," Amelia said between bites, "what does the great Daniel Blackwood want with a coffee shop girl? Slumming it for the week? Social experiment? Reality show?" "Do you always assume the worst about people?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Not people. Just obscenely wealthy men who suddenly develop an interest in women who can barely make rent." Daniel set down his fork. "Fair enough. I've done nothing to earn your trust." He considered his words carefully. "The truth is, you're the first person in years who's spoken to me like I'm just a person." "That's sad," Amelia said quietly, her cynicism momentarily suspended. "Is it? I've worked hard to build what I have. And in the process, built walls so high no one treats you normally anymore." Daniel felt uncomfortably exposed, as if she'd peered directly into parts of himself he rarely acknowledged. He changed the subject. "What about you? Tell me something real." Amelia twirled her spoon in the borscht. "I have an art degree gathering dust while I serve coffee to pay off student loans. I share a shoebox apartment with Casey and her cat, who hates me. My parents think I've failed at life. Real enough?" "And yet you laugh more freely than anyone I know," Daniel observed. "What's the alternative? Crying doesn't pay bills." As they walked through the East Village after dinner, an early autumn chill settling around them, Daniel found himself talking about things he rarely discussed: his parents' bitter divorce, the crushing expectations that came with his family, name, the loneliness at the top. They stopped at a tiny gallery featuring local artists. Inside, Amelia transformed, her eyes lighting up as she explained techniques and perspectives with a passion that captivated him. He'd dated supermodels and socialites but had never found any of them as beautiful as Amelia was in that moment, gesturing excitedly about brush strokes. "You should be doing this," he said abruptly, "not serving coffee." Her animation dimmed. "Welcome to reality, Blackwood. Dreams don't pay New York rent." Later, as his driver pulled up in his sleek black Bentley, the disparity between their worlds became impossible to ignore. "I had a surprisingly good time," Amelia admitted, keeping a deliberate distance between them on the sidewalk. "High praise indeed," Daniel replied with a wry smile. "Would surprisingly good be enough to warrant a second date?" Amelia bit her lip, conflicted. "This isn't a fairy tale, Daniel. You're you, and I'm me. Tomorrow you'll go back to your penthouse and billion-dollar deals, and I'll go back to making lattes and stretching ramen packets into multiple meals. What if I don't want to go back?" The vulnerability in his voice surprised them both. For a moment, something softened in her eyes, but then she squared her shoulders. "Everyone always goes back." "Let me prove you wrong," he said, stepping closer. "How?" "Have dinner with me again, tomorrow. I work the closing shift." "The day after, then?" Amelia shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're not used to hearing no, are you?" "Not even slightly," he admitted. "Fine. One more. Dinner. But this time I picked the place." As his car pulled away, Daniel realized two things. He hadn't checked his phone once during their entire evening together, and for the first time in years, the gnawing emptiness inside him had briefly subsided. What he didn't know was that Amelia was already steeling herself against falling for him, convinced that men like Daniel Blackwood didn't change and that for him, She could only ever be a temporary curiosity, a brief escape from his real life. She'd been burned before, and she wasn't about to let herself become another rich man's amusing diversion. No matter how surprisingly real he seemed tonight. He took you where? Casey's screech echoed through their tiny apartment, causing Mr. Whiskers to dart under the couch in alarm. Amelia flopped onto their threadbare sofa, kicking off her boots. Coney Island, for hot dogs and the Ferris wheel. It had been 3 weeks since their first date, and Daniel Blackwood, the man whose ruthless business decisions regularly made front-page news, had spent his Saturday eating Nathan's Famous and failing spectacularly at carnival games. The tabloids would implode, Casey mused, sitting cross-legged on their coffee table. Did anyone recognize him? He wore a baseball cap and glasses, looked like a completely different person. Amelia smiled at the memory of Daniel's childlike excitement on the Wonder Wheel, how he'd insisted on riding it twice. Casey studied her friend's face. Oh, no, you're falling for Billionaire Ken. I am not, Amelia protested too quickly. Your face lights up like Times Square on New Year's when you talk about him. Casey's expression turned serious. Just be careful, Ames. Men like him don't marry baristas. Amelia threw a pillow at her. Who said anything about marriage? We're just hanging out. Hanging out doesn't include private helicopter rides to the Hamptons for lunch. That was one time, and only because he had a meeting there anyway. Casey raised a skeptical eyebrow. Whatever helps you sleep at night, just remember Jeremy. Amelia's smile faded at the mention of her ex. Jeremy Whitehall, old money, summer homes in 3 countries, and a talent for making Amelia believe she was different from the other working-class girls he'd dated and discarded, until his mother had intervened and he'd chosen family approval over love. Daniel's not Jeremy, Amelia said quietly. They're all Jeremy when push comes to shove. Before Amelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. Daniel wanted to see her tonight. Something important. Speak of the devil, Casey murmured, reading over her shoulder. An hour later, Amelia found herself in Daniel's penthouse for the first time. The 5,000-square-foot space overlooking Central Park made her physically dizzy. All clean lines, museum-worthy art, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a glittering Manhattan panorama. This place could fit my entire apartment building, she said, trying to mask her discomfort with humor. Daniel appeared from his home office, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He'd loosened his tie, and his usually perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Is everything okay? She asked. I have to go to Tokyo tomorrow morning. Oh. Amelia fought to keep disappointment from her voice. Business? A hostile takeover that's turned complicated. He stepped closer. Come with me. Amelia blinked. To Tokyo, Daniel, I can't just... Why not? I've checked. You're off for the next 4 days. We could be back by then. Because I have responsibilities. A job that barely tolerates my existing schedule, rent due next week, and... She stopped herself. This isn't my world. Daniel took her hands. It could be. Something in his voice made her look up. The intensity in his eyes frightened her. What are you saying? I've never felt this way about anyone, he said, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. These past weeks with you, it's like I've been sleepwalking my entire life and suddenly I'm awake. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Daniel, let me finish, he said gently. I know it's fast. I know our worlds are different. But when I'm with you, none of that matters. You see me, not my money, not my companies, just me. He led her to the sofa, and they sat facing each other, her hands still in his. What if you didn't have to worry about rent or your job? What if you could paint again, open that gallery you've talked about? Alarm bells rang in Amelia's head. I can't take your money. I'm not offering charity, he said quickly. I'm offering partnership, a chance for us to explore what this could be without the stress of your financial situation hanging over us. That's exactly what it would be. Charity. Or worse, keeping me like some pet. She pulled her hands away. I won't be bought, Daniel. Frustration flickered across his face. That's not what I'm trying to do. Isn't it? You're offering to solve all my problems with your money. That's not a partnership, that's a power imbalance. Then what do you want? He asked, exasperated. I'm trying to help. I don't need your help, she said, standing up. I've managed 28 years without a billionaire swooping in to rescue me. Daniel rubbed his temples. You're impossibly stubborn. And you're impossibly privileged if you think throwing money at me is the solution. They stared at each other, at an impasse. Finally, Daniel sighed. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You're right, I don't know how to do this. My money has always been part of who I am, how I operate in the world. The vulnerability in his admission deflated Amelia's anger. She sat back down closer this time. I know, she said softly, but if we're going to have any chance, you need to understand. I have to stand on my own. Otherwise, I'll never know if what's between us is real or just convenient. Daniel nodded slowly. No Tokyo, then. No Tokyo, she confirmed, then smiled. At least not this time. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. When I get back, we start fresh. No grand gestures, no financial solutions. Just us figuring this out, whatever this is. I'd like that, Amelia said, meaning it. As they sealed the promise with a kiss, their first, neither could have predicted how quickly that promise would be broken, or how a simple misunderstanding would spiral into the greatest test their fledgling relationship would face. Because while Daniel boarded his private jet to Tokyo the next morning, someone else was boarding a flight back to New York, someone whose return would upend everything. Jeremy Whitehall, with an engagement ring in his pocket and a newfound courage to defy his family for the woman he'd never stopped loving. The Tokyo deal was an unmitigated disaster. Daniel's acquisition target, a cutting-edge robotics firm, had leaked their negotiations to a rival company. Now, instead of a clean takeover, he was embroiled in a bidding war that had doubled the price overnight. We should walk away, Marcus Chen, his CFO, advised as they sat in the conference room of Tokyo's most exclusive hotel. The numbers no longer make sense. Daniel stared out at the neon-lit skyline, his mind not on the deal but on Amelia. He'd texted her daily, but her responses had grown increasingly sporadic and brief. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Mr. Blackwood? Marcus prompted. Double the offer, Daniel said abruptly. What? Just do it. Daniel stood, straightening his tie. And book the jet. We're going home tonight. 20 hours later, exhausted from the flight and still, in his rumpled suit, Daniel stood outside Brood Awakening. Through the window, he could see Amelia wiping down tables, her hair tied back, laughing at something a customer had said. The sight of her made his chest ache. 3 weeks of knowing her, and somehow she'd become essential. The realization terrified him. He was about to push open the door when another man approached Amelia from behind, placing his hands over her eyes in a familiar gesture. Daniel froze. Amelia spun around, her shock visible even from outside. The man, tall, sandy-haired, wearing an expensive-looking watch that caught the light, said something that made Amelia's hand fly to her mouth. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he could read their body language. History, intimacy, and unless he was mistaken, the small velvet box the man was now holding could only mean one thing: a proposal. Daniel backed away from the door, a cold void opening inside him. His phone buzzed. Marcus, with questions about the deal. For once in his life, business would have to wait. He found the nearest bar and ordered a scotch, neat. Meanwhile, inside the cafe, Amelia stared at Jeremy in disbelief. You can't be serious, she said, eyeing the ring like it might bite her. Jeremy Whitehall's smile faltered. I've never been more serious about anything. I made a mistake, Ames. The biggest mistake of my life. Which part was the mistake? Breaking up with me because Mummy didn't approve? Or waiting 2 years to decide I was worth fighting for? Customers were starting to stare. Casey, behind the counter, mouthed, "Oh my God," and gestured frantically toward the back room. "Let's talk somewhere private," Jeremy suggested, as if reading Casey's mind. In the cramped storage room, surrounded by coffee beans and paper supplies, Jeremy poured out his heart. How he'd tried to please his family, how miserable he'd been without her, how he'd finally stood up to his mother, told her he was marrying Amelia with or without her blessing. "I never stopped loving you," he finished, taking her hands. "Say you'll give us another chance." Amelia's mind whirled. 6 months ago, she would have given anything to hear these words. Now they left her confused rather than elated. "I need time to think," she said finally. "This is a lot." Jeremy nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'm staying at the Pierre. Call me when you're ready to talk." After he left, Casey pounced. "Spill. Everything. Now." Amelia collapsed into a chair. "He wants me back. Says he told his mother to accept me or lose him." "And what about Mr. Billionaire?" "Daniel's in Tokyo," Amelia said, as if that explained anything. "He won't be forever." Amelia buried her face in her hands. "I know." Later that night, as she tossed and turned in bed, her phone pinged with a text from Daniel. "Back in New York. Need to see you." She stared at the message, her stomach knotting. What was she supposed to say? "Sorry, can't see you. My ex just proposed and I'm considering it." Before she could respond, another text came through. "Something's happened. It's not good. Could use a friend right now." Concern overrode her hesitation. Whatever was happening in her complicated love life, Daniel sounded like he genuinely needed her. She found him at a small jazz club in Harlem, tucked into a corner booth, nursing what appeared to be his 3rd or 4th drink. "Daniel," she said cautiously, sliding in across from him. He looked up, his eyes unfocused. "You came." "Of course I came. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." He laughed bitterly. "The Tokyo deal's falling apart. My board's questioning my judgment. And the woman I think I might be falling in love with is getting engaged to someone else." Amelia went cold. "What?" "Don't deny it. I saw you at the cafe." He took another swig of his drink. "Who is he?" "That's not... It's complicated," she stammered. "I bet it is." His voice was hard, a version of him she hadn't seen before. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long have you been seeing him?" "I haven't. Jeremy is my ex. He showed up out of nowhere today." "With a ring," Daniel pointed out, his face a mask of hurt. "That I didn't accept." Amelia leaned forward. "Daniel, I wouldn't do that to you." But alcohol and insecurity had formed an impenetrable wall around him. "It's fine," he said, though clearly it wasn't. "We never defined what this was anyway." "Don't do that," Amelia said, her own anger rising. "Don't dismiss what's been growing between us just because you're scared or jealous." "I'm not scared," he shot back. "I'm being realistic. We're from different worlds, Amelia. Maybe this is for the best." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Wow," she said quietly. "Casey was right about you." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means when things get hard, men like you cut and run. You're all the same." Daniel's jaw tightened. "If that's what you think, then why are you here?" "I don't know anymore," Amelia said, gathering her purse. "Goodbye, Daniel." She walked out, tears blurring her vision, not looking back to see Daniel's face crumple, or the way his hand reached out after her before falling limply back to the table. Outside, the rain that had been threatening all day finally broke. As Amelia stood getting drenched, too numb to move, her phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Dinner tomorrow?" "I made reservations at your favorite place." She stared at the message, then at the jazz club door, waiting for Daniel to come after her. He didn't. With shaking fingers, she typed, "Yes, pick me up at 7. "You're miserable." Casey stated bluntly, watching Amelia pick at her breakfast. 3 weeks had passed since the disastrous night at the jazz club. 3 weeks of Jeremy whisking Amelia to Broadway shows and exclusive restaurants. 3 weeks of his mother's thawing acceptance, culminating in an excruciating tea at the Whitehall estate where the older woman had measured Amelia for future improvements like a contractor assessing a fixer-upper. "I'm not miserable," Amelia protested weakly. "I'm adjusting to a life you don't want with a man you don't love." "I do love Jeremy," Amelia insisted, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Casey set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. "Then why do you check your phone 50 times a day hoping for a text from Daniel? Why do you still have his business card taped inside your sketchbook?" Amelia flushed. "I don't. Save it for someone who hasn't been your best friend since freshman year." Casey softened her tone. "Look, I was wrong about Daniel. After the cafe incident—" "What cafe incident?" Amelia interrupted. Casey looked sheepish. "I might have cornered him when he came looking for you last week." "He came to the cafe?" Amelia's heart skipped. "You never told me, because you were out with Jeremy. And to be honest, I gave Daniel hell. Told him he was a coward for not fighting for you." Casey picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "But the way he looked when I told him you were giving Jeremy another chance. Ames, that man is wrecked." Amelia's throat tightened. "It doesn't matter, he made his choice when he pushed me away. And you made yours when you ran back to Jeremy after one fight with Daniel." The truth of it stung. Before Amelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Dinner at my parents' tonight. Mother invited the Ashfords. Wear something appropriate. Car will pick you up at 6. Casey read the message over her shoulder and raised an eyebrow. "Wear something appropriate? Girl, run." Amelia sighed. "It's just his way. It's controlling is what it is. Daniel never told you what to wear." "No, he just tried to solve all my problems with his money," Amelia snapped. "At least he saw them as problems to solve, not things to change about you." Casey stood, collecting her dishes. "Jeremy wants to mold you into his perfect society wife. Daniel just wanted you exactly as you are." The words followed Amelia as she dressed for dinner that evening, squeezing into the conservative blue dress Jeremy had bought her. "To bring out your eyes," he'd said, though she suspected it was more to meet his mother's approval. As the hired car drove her through the glittering Manhattan streets, she stared out the window, Casey's words echoing in her mind. Was she right? Had Amelia jumped back into Jeremy's arms not out of love, but fear? The car stopped at a red light beside a massive electronic billboard. Amelia's heart nearly stopped when Daniel's face appeared on the screen, promoting his company's latest tech innovation. He looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes the makeup department hadn't quite concealed. "We're changing direction," his recorded voice announced to the city. "Blackwood Enterprises is investing in the arts. New York's creative community deserves support, not gentrification." Amelia couldn't breathe. Daniel was launching an arts initiative, the very thing they'd discussed on their dates when she'd passionately lamented the closure of galleries and studios due to rising rents. He'd listened, really listened. The light changed, and the car moved on, but Amelia couldn't tear her eyes from the receding billboard. For the first time in weeks, something inside her shifted, a quiet certainty taking root. She was in the wrong car, heading toward the wrong life. "Actually," she said to the driver, "can you take me somewhere else?" 20 minutes later, she stood outside Daniel's penthouse building, heart racing. The doorman, recognizing her from her previous visit, let her up without calling ahead. She hesitated only briefly before knocking. When there was no answer, she tried the handle. The door swung open. "Daniel?" she called, stepping inside. The penthouse was in disarray, uncharacteristic for the normally meticulous Daniel. Papers covered the coffee table, takeout containers littered the kitchen counter, and an opened bottle of scotch sat half empty beside a tumbler. A sound from the terrace drew her attention. Through the glass doors, she could see Daniel leaning against the railing, Manhattan spread out beneath him like a carpet of stars. She slid open the door, Daniel? He whirled around, disbelief washing over his features. Amelia? What are you doing here? I saw the billboard, she said softly. About the arts initiative. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, quickly, suppressed. It was a good business decision. No, it wasn't, she countered, stepping closer. It was a good human decision, but probably a terrible business one. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My board certainly thinks so. Why did you do it? He turned back to the view, hands gripping the railing. Because you were right. About everything. Money isn't the answer to every problem. Some things matter more. Like what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Like making a difference, like being the kind of man who deserves someone like you. He faced her again, his vulnerability naked in his eyes. Even if I lost that chance the moment I let you walk away. Amelia's carefully constructed walls crumbled. You didn't lose your chance, she said, closing the distance between them. I got scared and ran back to what was familiar. But Jeremy isn't who I want. Daniel's breath caught. Who do you want? The man who listens when I talk about art, who eats hot dogs on Coney Island without complaint, who just threw his money and influence behind helping struggling artists because it mattered to me. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat race beneath her palm. I want you, Daniel. The real you. Not the billionaire, not the businessman. His hands cradled her face with infinite gentleness. I've been a complete idiot. So have I, she admitted with a watery laugh. What about Jeremy? Amelia winced. I need to end things properly. He deserves that much. And then we try again. Properly this time. No running away when things get hard. No grand gestures to fix everything with money. I can't promise I won't slip sometimes, Daniel said honestly. Old habits. I know. And I can't promise I won't get insecure about our different worlds, but I think, she smiled up at him, I think it's worth figuring out together. As their lips met, the city lights twinkling around them, neither noticed the elevator doors opening in the penthouse foyer, or Jeremy Whitehall stepping out, having tracked Amelia's phone location. They didn't see the shock on his face as he watched through the glass doors or the slow, sad realization that dawned in his eyes. What they did notice moments later was the quiet ding of the elevator departing, carrying with it the last remnants of Amelia's past. And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with the city spread out before them, the future, complex and uncertain as it might be, had never looked more promising. I can't believe you quit, Casey exclaimed, watching Amelia pack up her locker at Brood Awakening for the last time. I can't believe it took me this long, Amelia replied, carefully wrapping the ceramic mug Daniel had given her after their reconciliation, emblazoned with "World's Most Stubborn Barista." 6 months had passed since that night on the penthouse terrace. 6 months of careful navigation through the minefield of their different worlds. There had been arguments about money, about independence, about Daniel's workaholic tendencies and Amelia's reflexive pride. But never again had either of them walked away when things got difficult. So, gallery manager, Casey mused, folding her arms. Fancy. Not just manager, co-owner. The distinction mattered to Amelia. When Daniel had approached her about his arts initiative needing someone to run its flagship gallery in Brooklyn, she'd been initially resistant. I don't want special treatment, she'd told him over dinner in his, now their, kitchen. It's not special treatment if you're the most qualified person for the job, he'd countered, serving her the pasta he'd learned to cook, badly, but with enthusiasm. But if it makes you feel better, you can buy in as a partner. Small percentage at first with options to increase your stake as the gallery grows. They'd negotiated like the partners they were becoming. Daniel learning to step back from controlling everything. Amelia learning to accept help without seeing it as charity. The result was Perspectives Gallery, opening next week in a converted warehouse in Dumbo. Earth to Amelia, Casey said, waving a hand in front of her face. You went all dreamy again. Amelia grinned. Sorry, just thinking about the opening. About that? Casey shifted uncomfortably. There's something I need to tell you. About the opening. Amelia raised an eyebrow. What? Jeremy RSVP'd, he's coming. Amelia stilled. Oh. After their silent departure from Daniel's penthouse that night, Jeremy had disappeared from her life completely. The next day, a messenger had delivered the few possessions she'd left at his apartment along with a simple note. I understand now. Be happy. She'd tried to contact him to apologize properly, but he'd changed his number. Through mutual acquaintances, she'd heard he'd taken an extended trip to Europe. Are you okay with that? Casey asked cautiously. Amelia considered the question. Yes, she said finally. I think I am. Later that evening, as Amelia sorted through submissions for the gallery's opening exhibition in their home office, Daniel arrived looking exhausted but triumphant. The Tokyo deal is finally closed, he announced, loosening his tie. 2 years, 3 heart attacks, and more gray hairs than I care to count, but we got it. Congratulations, Amelia said, rising to kiss him. I'm proud of you. For making a billion-dollar acquisition? He teased. For doing it while still making it home for dinner most nights, she corrected, taking his hand and leading him to the kitchen where she'd kept his plate warm. That's the real achievement. As Daniel ate, Amelia shared Casey's news about Jeremy. Will that be weird for you? She asked. Daniel considered this as he chewed. It might have been once, he admitted. But not anymore. We both needed the wake-up call he inadvertently gave us. When did you get so wise? She asked, half joking. Around the time I realized I'd rather have you than another $1 billion. His smile turned mischievous. Though both is nice too. She swatted his arm. Incorrigible. You love it. I love you. She corrected, the words still new enough to make her heart flutter. His expression softened. I love you too, which reminds me. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small black box. Amelia's breath caught. Daniel. Before you panic, he said quickly, this isn't what you think. Well, not exactly. He opened the box to reveal not an engagement ring, but a key. Old-fashioned brass, clearly antique. What is this? She asked, taking it carefully. The key to your studio, he said. The brownstone next door came on the market last week. I bought it. You bought an entire building for a studio? She asked, eyes wide. Not just any studio, your studio. To paint again, like you've been talking about. He took her hands in. His. No strings attached. It's in your name only. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it. Say you'll paint again, even with the gallery keeping you busy. His eyes held hers. I fell in love with the barista who never gave up on her art, even when life made it nearly impossible. I will, she promised. But Daniel, a whole building? He winced slightly. Too much? I'm still calibrating the grand gesture scale. She laughed through her tears. Maybe a little, but the gesture itself, it's perfect. The night of the Biat gallery opening arrived with all the nervous energy of a Broadway premiere. Perspectives was filled to capacity. Artists, critics, collectors, and socialites mingling in a vibrant cross-section of New York that wouldn't normally intersect. Amelia, stunning in a midnight blue dress she'd chosen herself, and that Daniel had privately admitted was far more beautiful than anything he could have suggested, moved through the crowd with newfound confidence. Casey, now the manager of 2 Brood Awakening locations thanks to Daniel's quiet investment, cornered her by a striking mixed media piece. Jeremy's here, she whispered. 3 o'clock. Amelia turned to see her ex across the room, looking tanned and relaxed in a way she'd never seen him before. Their eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, Jeremy offered a small, genuine smile and raised his champagne glass in a distant toast. Amelia returned the gesture, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifting from her shoulders. Closure. Everything okay? Daniel appeared at her side, sensing the moment. "Everything's perfect," she said, meaning it. As the evening wound down, critics raving about the exhibition and sales exceeding all projections, Daniel clinked a fork against his glass to gather everyone's attention. "I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, looking more relaxed in this artistic crowd than he ever had at corporate functions. "But more importantly, I want to thank the woman who made all this possible. Not just this gallery, but a fundamental shift in how Blackwood Enterprises approaches community investment." Amelia blushed as all eyes turned to her. "Some of you know parts of our story," Daniel continued. "How a stubborn barista refused to be impressed by a billionaire and taught him the value of things money can't buy." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. "What you might not know is how she's transformed not just my business but my life." His voice grew more intimate, though the microphone carried it clearly. "Amelia Foster sees people, really sees them, beyond status or wealth or social position. It's a rare gift, and I'm a better man for having been truly seen by her." Amelia felt tears threatening again, but held them back as Daniel made his way to her side. "Which is why," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I'd like to ask her a question." This time, the box he withdrew held a ring, an emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, vintage and utterly unlike the massive rocks his social circle favored. A collective gasp swept through the gallery as Daniel dropped to one knee. "Amelia," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, "I'm not asking because you've made me a better businessman, though you have. I'm not asking because you've opened my eyes to a world beyond profit margins, though you've done that too." He took her hand. "I'm asking because I love your stubborn independence, your fierce loyalty, your unapologetic passion for what matters. I'm asking because I can't imagine a future without arguing with you about whether private jets are a necessary expense." Laughter, both hers and the crowd's, mixed with joyful tears. "Will you marry me? Not as a Blackwood acquisition or a society wife, but as my equal partner in everything?" Amelia looked down at this man, powerful and vulnerable, arrogant and humble, infuriating and wonderful, and knew with absolute certainty her answer. "Yes," she said simply, "but I'm keeping my last name." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Daniel replied, sliding the ring onto her finger before rising to kiss her amid cheers and applause. As the celebration continued around them, Amelia caught sight of Jeremy slipping out the door, a peaceful expression on his face. In the same moment, Casey was giving her an enthusiastic thumbs up while simultaneously wiping away tears. Later, as they walked hand in hand along the Brooklyn waterfront, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river, Amelia asked, "Are you sure about this? Marrying someone from a completely different world?" Daniel squeezed her hand. "That's the whole point, isn't it? You showed me a world I didn't know existed. I showed you one you'd only seen from the outside. Together we get to create something new. A perspective neither of us could have alone," she mused, thinking of the gallery's name. "Exactly." He pulled her close as they watched a boat glide past. "Besides, who wants easy? Easy is boring." "We are definitely not boring," Amelia agreed with a laugh. "To not boring," Daniel said, kissing her beneath the Brooklyn Bridge as the city that had brought them together continued its eternal electric hum around them, a backdrop to their improbable, complicated, and utterly perfect love story. Epilogue. 1 year later, Perspectives had expanded to 3 locations, with plans for a 4th in Chicago. Amelia's own artwork, which she'd finally found the courage to exhibit, had received critical acclaim and sparked a bidding war that still made her blush to think about. Daniel had restructured Blackwood Enterprises to prioritize ethical investment and community development alongside profit, shocking the business world, but attracting a new generation of talent and partners aligned with this vision. Casey had opened her own cafe adjacent to the original gallery, specializing in ethically sourced coffee and providing exhibition space for emerging artists. And Jeremy? He'd found his own path away from family expectations, opening a successful literary agency representing underrepresented voices and eventually finding love with one of his clients, a brilliant novelist who challenged him in all the ways Amelia once had. As for the newlyweds, they split their time between the penthouse, for convenience, and a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, for sanity, continuing to navigate the collision of their worlds with arguments, compromises, laughter, and love. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy. But as Amelia often said when interviewed about their unusual partnership, the best art comes from contrast, from the tension of opposites finding harmony without losing their essential nature. And really, wasn't that what love was all about?